All right, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Welcome to the Advocacy Issues and Programs Committee meeting. I am Bo, I'm the chair. Did we usually go around and have everyone introduce themselves at this committee?
We usually do introductions at committee.
Let's do it. All right, if you can just share who you are and what agency you're with.
Christina Ellison with New Beginnings Bluegrass.
I'm Naomi Cluett with the Lexington Public Library.
I'm Bee Mead. I've recently joined HPI.
Kitty Collins, I'm with Mountain Comprehensive Care.
Mackenzie Cooksey, I'm with Mount Comprehensive Care as well.
Evan Charles in place of Marty Jones for Community Action Council.
Erica Dominguez with Lexington Rescue Mission.
Sherry Russell with the Housing Advocate with the Urban County Government.
Amy Cody with Bluegrass Care Navigators.
David Shad with the Hope Center.
Eric Evans, Independence Place. Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Lindsay Bell with Step by Step.
Eric Evans with the Independence Place.
I'm Jeff Herron. I'm the manager of LFUCG's Office of Homelessness Prevention and Intervention.
Yeah.
Bruce Davis, HPI Board.
Great. So first on the agenda is approval of minutes from December. Are there any questions or corrections from the December minutes? Is there a motion for approval?
I'll move.
I'll second.
All right. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. All right. So first on the agenda is Jeff with COC recruitment open house meeting.
Thank you. So we had talked in December about potentially targeting a meeting to try to recruit some new COC partners. Think about, who might not be at the table, extend an invite, or ask our existing partners to even bring a friend to a meeting. We thought the advocacy committees where that kind of efforts happened in the past and might be a good spot to continue that effort. Originally, we had talked in December about maybe doing that with this month's meeting. January is an incredibly busy time in the Office of Homelessness. In addition to the point in time count, we were onboarding a new staff member and we moved offices. So running all of that at once, it did not seem like a good idea for us to try to squeeze that into a short timeline with a lot of other needs. So I wanted to propose making that a focus for our April 24th meeting. That would be something that would give us an opportunity to potentially recruit some new partners in advance of the COC NOFO dropping in the summer and the authoring of our collaborative application for the Continuum of Care program. Some of the things that I thought that we could look at within that meeting, I want to create a meeting that would be very accessible both to new and existing members of the Continuum of Care, kind of giving a little bit of a review of our objectives, what our structure is, maybe a sense of what our annual timeline looks like, and spend the bulk of the meeting really focusing in on the content that we include in that Continuum of Care application, specifically looking at the continuum strategies. So what are our strategies to try to prevent homelessness? What are our strategies to address first-time homelessness, to prevent returns, to increase income? I think that kind of content could be mutually beneficial for both new and existing partners. I think in terms of new members, it might be something where we can find some new things to incorporate into those strategies. Maybe there's something that someone that's doing in the community that's not known to us. Maybe there's somebody that can provide some resources or support for those strategies that we haven't previously had available to us. But also just a refresher for all of us to be continually thinking about those strategies and working to improve them, seeing if there's things that maybe we're doing that are not working so well for us, or things that we'd like to maybe add or modify. My office will be glad to produce some flyers or materials that you can use to distribute to other organizations or colleagues that you might know to help with that recruitment and getting people to the table. But just wanted to raise that discussion to see if that date works for everyone to use for this purpose, or if there's any certain content that we would seek to try to pull together for that meeting. Any thoughts or input?
And what was the date you wanted to target again?
April 24th, so it should be, this meeting usually falls on the 4th Wednesday of the month. Any thoughts at all? Is it a good idea? Do we want to pursue it?
Yes.
What kind of partners do you want to bring in?
Honestly, we tend to have the heaviest participation consistently from our homeless service providers, which does make sense. But I would really like to see us have better representation from other systems and fields. Maybe some of the folks that are working with our population, but maybe it's just not their mission statement. But maybe, for example, we've been working increasingly to try to get more representation and partnership from our healthcare partners. Maybe thinking about some of the other agencies that might provide services other than housing. Would love to additionally, at some point, maybe occasionally get some input directly from some state offices like DCBS on things like increasing income. Maybe if we can streamline some processes, make sure as they have changes that there's better information that trickles down to our agencies and our frontline staff. But really just trying to think about who is not an existing or current COC partner, and inviting people in to learn about our work, and at the very least, they have a better sense of what we do and how to reach out to us. But maybe it's something where they're moved to become more involved with our work.
With the thought mention of DCBS, would it be better to maybe try to target someone from the Lexington office or maybe just from the state office of Frankfurt?
So, I usually lean towards local in the sense that I think that's oftentimes the best, so that if you have somebody that you're trying to work with here, there's a point of contact, there's a relationship that we can lean on.
Sure.
Obviously, I can talk with state leadership, but I think most of the time what we really need is somebody who's local. I know when I was doing direct service, for example, trying to obtain the community integration supplement was like a nightmare. It was typically me sitting in the DCBS office all day long, starting at the time they open, potentially leaving before we'd ever seen someone. Generally, there was maybe 1 or 2 people on staff that were even familiar with the supplement and its guidelines and could actually see us. And if there was ever a question, you don't want to necessarily wait to bring your question to the office and sit in the waiting room all day just to find out that if I had the ability to ask this question in advance, I probably could have prevented a wasted trip or several hours of waiting. So just thinking about trying to think about all the different systems and agencies that we might interface with, and how can we better help them understand our missions and maybe get some assistance in getting to our goals.
A thought that crossed my mind too was guardianship services, so I know there's a Lexington office here, and I thought maybe we could reach out to that office as well. So.
What about prosecution office? County attorney's office? Carlos, that works for the city now. Do you know Carlos? He works in the legal department. He was one of our prosecutors. I retired from there, but he was one of our prosecutors for years.
Obviously, Angela Evans is a former board member, so I'm sure that if we reach out to her, she would be glad to have somebody participate from her office.
Do you see a space for faith organizations?
So we do sometimes hear from faith organizations. We do have at least a couple who are members. I just don't usually actively see them a lot at meetings. So that's also something that if we can increase, I would love more participation from.
Do we have a list anywhere of all the organizations that are technically a part of the COC?
There's a listing on our website, the Lexington Homelessness website. And then I'm sure I have an internal listing in our office. We technically have something like 60-something formal members. Look around the table.
Yeah. I was like, it's
Who do
kind
you
of the
see
same.
today? Who do you typically see? And I know part of that is everybody has a lot of meetings. There has to be utility to the meetings for people to come. But part of that idea of that open house kind of format is, yes, I want to share information, but I also want to hear from those persons who are not members. What is it that we could help you with? What would make a meeting or participation in the COC beneficial to you so that we could have a little bit more active participation?
So if you're doing this on an open house format, then I would love to be able to bring our executive director in and see how we can be involved, because as you know, our scope is helping those with all disabilities that, since I'm now taking this position, I'm trying to expand it. I've also talked to an old friend of yours, Lindsay, at KHC, about getting onto their continuum care so we can kind of help mainstream the 17 counties that we cover, including Fayette County. So yeah, our organization would definitely be interested in being involved with that for sure.
See, that's kind of an example of you guys work in a kind of specific space. You deal with housing a lot nowadays, but you might know of partners that we don't regularly have contact with who you might want to.
Well, we also help with employment too. So we work through the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation to, get recruits for that as well. And also, I forget the other thing. I know that we're not as much involved with helping them with getting benefits and that type of thing. That's something we're exploring as well. So, but yeah, for sure, it's something I think that would be a good fit for us, especially with housing. So.
Other suggestions of folks that you guys want me to make sure that we're reaching out to, or other content that we would want covered in a meeting like that?
Christina and I and Marissa are in this sequential intercept model thing, which we keep saying the housing part should come through here. So I think maybe inviting some of the people from there who aren't already involved. So I can, I have a list, so I can send it to you. And probably not all of those people, but there are some people who would probably actually participate. I think most people got volunteered for the groups.
Yes, and I think that another good example, there might be, if we can get the right person from that group here, maybe they would find ways to better integrate us into that effort.
Yeah.
Jeff, is there anyone from the community tabletop that you think that I should pass on?
I'll think on that. I know I've already been working and talking a lot with Goodwill, and I believe they already are a formal member. But I'll have to think back when I was at your meeting of who else was there and if there's anybody that I might need contact info for.
Okay, and I'm getting my practicum to kind of do us a listserv kind of, because we had several new ones that was at the one that we had last Friday. So.
Okay. Yeah. Definitely, and I can make sure to make sure that you all have the listing of our current partners, so that if you need to, you can always kind of cross-reference that if you wanted to take a look at it and maybe see who on your contact list we don't have representation from. That would be a good idea. Because Marissa and myself, once a year, have to sit down and we have to not only present our data in terms of how we're performing on certain measures, but we also have to present what the formal strategies for the COC are. And if we are not, as a group, all looking at that and working towards it throughout the year, then we might have not a lot of content to work with. And sometimes we just got our scoring and debrief on the last competition. Sometimes we're going to be in a very difficult situation to perform well through data alone. For example, one of the areas that we lost several points was permanent housing exits. Well, if you look in the application and the NOFO and how that criteria was scored, they were looking at HUD fiscal years 21 and 22. HUD fiscal year 21 would have been 10/1 of 2020 through September of 21. and fiscal year 22 would have been 10/1 of 21 through September of 22. We think about what's going on in the world and in our community during those 2 years, we're essentially talking about kind of the middle to late stages of COVID through just starting to emerge from COVID. During that time, there was, for a while, still an eviction moratorium. And then during that time period, it lifted and we saw rents go steadily up and vacancy rates go steadily down. So am I surprised that we didn't have a great performance on permanent housing exits during that time frame? Not really, but it's also something that I'm working with data from 1 to 2 years ago, and I'm gonna be judged and scored on it. The only place I can really make up the points if we have an issue like that is through our strategies and our narrative. So the better that we can beef up those strategies, one, we get more partial points just for the strategy alone, but we also have the benefit of getting to a more effective system that actually does perform better, that's going to ultimately be reflected in our data in future years. Any other thoughts you're welcome to voice now. You can also reach out to me and let me know if there's something that you would want to chat about, brainstorm on online.
I don't know if Jubilee Jobs is already a formal member. Okay, I thought
They are,
they might
and
be
see,
someone.
that's also another thing, is like re-energize some of those
Yeah.
existing members that maybe aren't here every meeting. I know that they probably have a lot of their own things going on, so it's not about throwing anyone under the bus, but like, if we could get the right, for example, if we're looking at Jubilee Jobs and employment supports, if we can maybe do a subgroup with those employment agencies and have them really help us beef up those strategies, I'm sure that it would lead to more effectiveness within our system. You know, as much as we talk about trying to move away from operating systems in silos, we're still kind of in those silos.
Jeff, do you have any verbiage that you could share, maybe that we could use when inviting others?
Yeah, I'll definitely work on drafting that, and I'll have that available within the next couple of weeks so that you have at least like a full calendar month to try to recruit people. But I want to do like a flyer, a short like paragraph description and things, so that you guys can use that and don't have to put it necessarily in your own words. I want to make it as easy as possible. I want it to be something you can just hit send.
Perfect.
But yeah, would love to do that for you.
And Jeff, the police department.
They are.
We're running.
And sometimes we had somebody that was kind of in an area of more kind of neighborhood relations that was with us quite a bit and then changed positions. And so sometimes it's just like finding that replacement person and making sure that they receive the information. Knowledge and contacts leave a lot when people leave positions. That's something I can obviously facilitate fairly easily, getting one of our neighborhood resource officers or a representative from police. I already have several folks that would be great for that. But yeah, we have some existing members who we just maybe need to reach back out to. Anything else on this item? All right. Continuing business.
Great. So next is an update from me on the source of income discrimination. So Lexington City Council did pass the ban on source of income discrimination, which is wonderful. And then almost immediately, the state government passed a law saying that local governments can't do that. So that has gone through both houses at the state. It's HB 18. Currently, HHCK, Homelessness Housing Coalition of Kentucky, is circulating a sign-on letter asking the governor to veto it. What I've heard is that Beshear is likely to veto it, but in Kentucky, vetoes are pretty easy to override. It just takes a majority. So it's, even if he vetoes it, it's likely to be sustained by the Senate and House. So that is sad, but I think that this continuum, I know, put a lot of work into telling the story to City Council about why this was a needed policy, and I think that we should be really proud of that work. And, you know, even if this time state government is shutting us down, we have those muscles and those relationships to use in the future. So, but yeah, that's where we are. But like I said, HHCK is circulating a sign-on letter. Can I send that through you, Jeff, or should I send it directly?
If you want to, I think I can get you my contact list if you want to
Yeah,
send
yeah.
that out. Just because since it's going to be direct input on a specific state bill, having that .gov on my email, we are not supposed to be engaging in lobbying, so I think it would be safer to have from you.
Cool. So I can send that from Adrian Bush at HHCK around. And yeah, that's where we are on that. Any questions, comments?
Do you have anybody on the state level, like the ACLU or somebody who can then take this bill to court?
I haven't been in any of those conversations, but I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, traditionally, when I worked in Louisiana, we had an issue like that. Some statewide civil liberties union would get involved and say basically this is unconstitutional. And
I know that during the time that it was still under consideration, there were national groups that were already looking at it and were prepared to take some actions.
Yeah.
So I think some of that's already in process. I'll see what I can do about getting an update. But I know that it was already something that was talked about prior to it passing the Senate.
because here's the thing, is that if you can get this taken to court, then they can't enforce it until it gets out of court, and that allows Lexington to then go forward with what they just passed. Because the state can't enforce something until the state Supreme Court says, you know, this is unconstitutional or constitutional, then it's back to the drawing board for them and we win. So, in a nutshell. I did this for 4 years in Louisiana when we would have to approach the ACLU and getting bills taken to court so when they're being passed. It was mainly over Obamacare and Medicaid expansion back then, but same concept. So.
Right. Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, I look forward to hearing, Jeff, any updates you have.
They're involved with the Safer Kentucky stuff already, and this is just sort of one of those adjacent bills, so I bet they're going to pick this up too. I can't imagine that they wouldn't. It seems right up their alley. So.
There are a lot of things in that bill that were just like cringeworthy.
It's like a lifetime's work for somebody.
Yeah, that really is, yeah.
This current legislative session's been packed full of issues that impact us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Great. Next is back to Jeff with lived experience engagement.
So Marissa unexpectedly was not with us this week, and she's been taking the lead on this effort. I know that she's been working on some ideas to try to move forward with our lived experience engagement efforts. Unfortunately, I'm just not really well prepared to present on it today, so I'm going to save that update for next time, but I anticipate that we will be having another engagement event either prior to or right around the same time as our next advocacy committee meeting. We're just trying to research things like different avenues that we can use to try to get compensation to folks that might expand the kinds of things that we're able to use as compensation. And it's just a lot of working through procurement policies, trying to talk with some organizations to see if there's somebody that might want to contract with us to directly kind of be the fiscal agent that would facilitate that kind of compensation. So boring bureaucratic stuff, and we should have a more clear sense of where we're at next meeting. The next item was going to be Marissa's as well, but I will be able to fully present on that. That is a program standards update. So just a reminder of upcoming dates for the current calendar of reviews. We'll be taking a look on March 27th at our street outreach standards, and on May 22nd we'll be convening a meeting around a review and update to our emergency shelter standards. We will send out announcements in advance about those meetings so that all the relevant providers can be at the table. Typically, we've been meeting in the third floor conference room of the Phoenix building, so I anticipate that that's where we're going to be for those future meetings, but I'll confirm that for you. The bigger update for today is going to be the permanent supportive housing standards. The updated draft was in the meeting packet after doing several passes with our PSH providers. A couple of highlights or talking points around the bigger changes. Some of our other standards documents that have been developed since the PSH standards initially were developed included some language around COC values. So to keep consistency, we pulled some of that language and inserted it into this document as well. Our office also reviewed and updated all links within the document to make sure that any links that have potentially changed were corrected, as well as if there's been any kind of new information or new best practice resources, that those were included. There is some additions on page 3 to the personnel criteria. Much of that's really just going to be focusing on preferences wherever we can to hire persons with lived experience to do this work. There were some additional revisions in page 4 around program enrollment, just creating greater transparency around COC practices. On page 5, we did some revisions to housing identification criteria, knowing that our current housing market is really challenging. We just want to make sure that the language actually reflects what reasonably a housing provider can offer in terms of the number of housing unit options we present. We may not be able to present a high number of options to every household that we're enrolling due to the limitations not only of the market, but also sometimes some of the housing barriers that individuals face. On page 8, case management services, that language was updated to reflect HUD standards of Housing First. They had kind of previously given some contradictory language around requiring services but not requiring services, so we just tried to make that a little bit clearer. On page 10, we did revise references to our assessment tool, since we know that our community is going to be moving away from the VI SPDAT in the near future. And then there was some additions around client feedback on page 14. Any questions at first around that document? If not, will there be a motion from the membership to approve? Thank you, since you definitely were involved. Is there a second? All right, TC, thank you. All those in favor? All those opposed? The motion passes. All right, staying with me.
You're on a roll.
This is probably the last time that I'll do this here in this meeting. We have now been operating the second version of a state ID assistance program for almost a full calendar year. I think moving forward, rather than taking time of this meeting where there's not necessarily a lot of discussion, we'll move whatever kind of report that we have on this to program performance and evaluation, have it absorbed into the annual calendar review, just so that that committee, which generally makes our funding recommendations, can continue to look at this and determine if it's something we want to continue to fund and at what level. based on how effective it seems to be. So like I said, we started this almost a year ago. It initiated in March of '23 as efforts to try to move people to permanent housing as we winded down our winter resources. Originally, the board put about $1,200 towards this. Because there's a disconnect between the number of ID letters that are actually redeemed and those that are issued, technically, if I had gone through every one that we issued, we would have spent well beyond that, almost twice the amount. But we consistently are now seeing about 34% redemption rate. About 1/3 of those letters are getting redeemed. We now at this point would have at least another $450 or so out of what the board had originally put towards this cause. And we obviously have money in the current fiscal year that we can put behind this effort moving forward. Overall, we've issued almost 400 ID letters in just less than a year, and at least 129 persons as of the time I sent this out had redeemed their letters. I know we've gotten several more since then. One of the services that we're offering during our weekly outreach events at the Hope Village is access to state IDs. Several of those individuals have already redeemed their letters and obtained their ID, so as we work to house them, that won't be a barrier to them getting approved or moving into a housing unit. Other reminders, just a reminder to again, make sure you're providing the full legal name of the individual. We're still seeing a lot of requests that come through to us with names that differ from what's in HMIS and having to do some clarification. We don't want someone to make that trip and then be denied access. Sometimes the person that they interface with at the transportation cabinet might overlook that maybe there's been a legal change in the last name, but other staff might be inclined to deny that request because the letter doesn't match the individual's legal name. Also, still getting requests that maybe don't include a full middle name. If there is a middle name, please make sure that's included. Still occasionally some issues around the photos. It is used to try to make sure the individual presenting the letter is the person they state they are, so we have to be able to see them. I know sometimes our clients might have hats, hoods, sunglasses, totally fine under normal circumstances, but if we need to ID them, just ask if you can snap a photo, explain what it's for. When I was doing ID letters at Hope Village last week, not a single person balked at a request if I explained what it was for, and they were very willing to accommodate. And again, reduced cost is now $5, about $5.14 with the fee. So it's a really low cost way that we can try to support people and reduce barriers. Any questions or issues that folks are having with the ID program? Y'all are a talkative group. We're breezing through this agenda.
Now, not that our organization needs it a lot, but how would we get on to this?
So typically, what the state is allowing me to do is install charitable organizations that can verify someone's homelessness and that can use their address to receive that individual's ID and to place on the physical ID. So really all I need to do is work with an organization to get them set up with the state. What is a little bit challenging is it really does have to focus on persons who are experiencing homelessness. I've had a lot of requests for folks who might be marginally housed, and the challenge that I have is the state's looking for an address of a charitable organization to use. And so if I try to have those routed to a million different addresses that might be tied to persons who are marginally housed, I'm going to run into some issues being able to get that approval at the state level. But if you have anybody, we can always look at creating a partnership with your agency specifically for that, or making sure that we can funnel you to one of the existing partners of that program. So right now, all street outreach teams have access to that, all emergency shelters have access to that, and some of our housing providers that do like rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, like New Beginnings, for example, has submitted a couple. We just want to make sure that we have a pathway for anybody that's in a homeless situation, so I'm glad to explore new organizations or make sure I connect you with a current partner organization.
I just know in the past, before I started this organization, they've had a few consumers that they have used our address to receive mail, like insurance stuff and that kind of thing, so.
Yeah, and in that spirit, that would be a good fit. We could get you set up.
Okay, cool.
Just send me an email request, because it's not gonna live in my brain.
I know it won't. I know that feeling. Okay, cool beans.
Great. Next is other issues or public sharing. Anybody have anything else to add?
I was gonna ask how last week's Hope Village outreach went and any new directions to take moving forward with it.
So, for a second, I'm gonna put David on the spot and see if he has anything to say, just to give us all a second, and you have to let you all hear from somebody else, and then I'll follow up.
I do think it went well. I wish we would have gotten a head count, but there was a line all that whole time out the door. So,
About 20, 25 people.
It was pretty busy. We helped a lot of different people. We had some that had IDs and connected a lot with different agencies here. Helped with like strange things like that. I helped somebody file a police report and get a phone, and like just little things like that too. There were sort of pre-housing things, so I think it went well. More people than I really expected. And we did talk, Jeff and I talked about doing one of these at the village for some of the people who have mobility issues and can't get to the cafeteria. So we're playing that, what did we say, in 2 weeks?
I think we're looking at next week's.
So, because we do have some who have issues that make it hard for them to get there. So we want to make sure not to exclude those people. So, but yeah, it went well. I thought it was very productive.
So just for anybody that might be working with residents at the Hope Village, we're making that a weekly effort. It's Thursdays 9 to 11. Initially, last week was our first time out. We made that effort at the Jacobs cafeteria just to try to allow for a little bit more space. You know, initially we had more space at the shelter before we had to expand and get more beds. But now there are numbers that are trending down a little bit. So we think we are going to have an extra tent that we can use for this effort, like David said, to make sure it's also available right on site of the Hope Village. For this week, we're still going to be at the Jacobs cafeteria, which is just down the street. We did have quite a few people. Several of the people that came asked if we would be back because they want to follow up with us. Everyone was, and it makes me almost a little bit sad, everyone was incredibly grateful. And really, I just think of this as an effort where a lot of people were doing the work that they do every day. But I think for some folks, it was probably a little bit more compassion and assistance than they're used to receiving in their daily life. My office, I know, did at least 12 ID letters, ordered a birth certificate, completed a housing assessment or two, made a referral to somebody that is a high utilizer that we've talked about in some other meetings to get linked up with New Beginnings for a psychiatric evaluation. So there were some good outcomes even just from one entity that was there. I am pursuing a special board meeting right now to get approval for use of some funds that we can offer some financial assistance to those that do have income so that we can hopefully get them into permanent housing by the end of March. That's probably going to be something like deposit and first month's rent for those households. Essentially what we want to prevent is if there are folks we can reasonably get into housing, we don't want them to be displaced by operations coming to a close. I know that I'm not going to be able to permanently house every single person that's accessed the Hope Village at some point this season. What we're trying to prevent is people not having a place to stay as of April 1st. Definitely, if your organization wants to be a part of the efforts, I'm glad to give you that information, loop you into the contact list. But really appreciate everybody that did come out. We had really good representation from our providers. Your team had several folks there. The Hope Center outreach was there. Sherry and Caitlin from our housing advocacy team were there. Greenhouse had a representative. Rescue Mission, Mountain Comp had 3 or 4 staff. Everyone really did a tremendous job of thinking of this as a system project and not solely as a Hope Center project, and so I really appreciate that. Other announcements or public sharing? All right, if not, then next time we'll be back here at the Don Ball Campus Center. That will be April 24th. I'll send out some information within the next couple of weeks to help us recruit some more individuals for our open house format meeting. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess, do we need a formal call to adjourn? Anybody want to make a call? Bruce. Usually that's the
That means it's.
Unaccustomed as I am.
Some vote off,
I
yeah.
moved.
And if you ever need to do something.
Hearing and seeing no objections.
Okay.
Turn it right again.